Gerard and Rhino. Joining us now, the Attorney General for the state of Mississippi, Lynn Fitch. General, good to see you again. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning. Great to be with you again.
All right, so I know you and I have talked many times on the program about the efforts by the Attorney General's office to combat this horrible human trafficking situation that I think is one of those things that's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And you really have to dig and have folks that are involved in it, such as you and the Attorney General's office, to come explain what's going on and why we should be concerned about this. This has been a top priority for you, I believe, since you were elected in the office. Give us an update.
Absolutely, Gerard. And I appreciate SuperTalk and our listeners who've been very engaged in this topic, because our ultimate goal is to eradicate human trafficking.
Sure.
And to say to the traffickers, you're not welcome in the state of Mississippi. We take this seriously. These are victims, and we're here to help and support them. And you're absolutely right. In the last 2 years, we started the human trafficking unit within the AG's office. Great partnerships, public, private, with all of our law enforcement, local, federal. I mean, we've made great strides. And I tell you, it's encouraging to see everyone step up and understand and be looking for the signs wherever these individuals might be, whether they're in school or you might see them, in a convenience store, or whatever the case might be, and to call the hotline and give us these tips. And we've been working very diligently to help these victims, because there's a lot of recovery once we get the victims. And one of the things I want to share today, I think that's been so reflective of the hearts of Mississippians, where we see we can be supportive of these victims, and they are truly victims, because we have to stop and remember, Gerard, these individuals didn't ask to be in these human trafficking rings.
Right.
And over 50% are trafficked by someone that they loved or someone that they trusted. And many times they're in these rings and they can't get out. And so for us to all go in and be supportive and find ways to uplift them, empower them, help them get back into society are so extremely important. So today's a big day for us. Back in 2020, the legislature established a trafficking victim services program, and it's a fund that's set up to provide funds for housing, for therapy, any other services that these human trafficking survivors might need. And how this fund is set up, it's to be funded through court assessments, donations, direct appropriations, and it's managed by the Attorney General's office, comprised of a board, which is very important because these are appointees from the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker, DPS, CPS, and a services provider. And again, that is significant because you have all the individuals that are involved in victims, and again, in how we can provide services to them. So we've set up rules and regulations. We've been educating across the state about this fund. We've been training judges, talking to our clerks, and talking about the assessments, and then how we get those monies started and into this fund. It's been slow, unfortunately, but I will tell you, then there was a great year this year. The legislature appropriated $2.5 million to jumpstart this distribution. So we're excited. Today is the first day of the application period. We anticipate giving out the $2.5 million because, again, we want to be there. We want to help all these victims. We want them to be survivors, to get back into society.
Sure.
So it's an exciting time. We look forward to this application process that's starting today.
General, with the border on fire, I think there's a common perception, a misconception really, that human trafficking is something that occurs at the border, that's these cartels and so forth that are being paid to bring people into the country, and they end up trafficking those individuals. But I guess what I've learned from you, and also from Chief Dean Scott in Pearl, who's got a fair amount of experience dealing with this in his jurisdiction, is that often the victims are family members. And it's just heartbreaking when to learn about that. And so in that respect, we're certainly not exempt or invulnerable from this problem in Mississippi.
Not at all. And that's what's so unfortunate. Certainly, we are having some from the border come across, but the majority, like you just said, are family members, someone that they trusted that trafficked them, someone very close to them. And so then they're compelled, and they've got them in this human trafficking ring, and they just can't get out.
Right.
And, you know, and it is horrific. The behavior, many times they're trafficked for, you know, quick cash or drugs. And then it's just this continuous cycle, Gerard, and there's just no pulling back. And then these young people are in it, and then 5 years later they're still in it. And so it's on all of us. And I'll tell you, all of Mississippians have been great about seeing, talking, giving us information, notifying, you know, a local law enforcement agency notifying us or the hotline, and it's been so productive for us to go in and help these individuals.
Yeah. So you handed me these two little flip booklets here when you came in the studio. One is entitled Responding to a Domestic Violence Call, and this is a reference for law enforcement that was published in 2021, and then the other, Responding to a Human Trafficking Report, published just a few months ago in June. First, these are really well done, very professional, and I like the format. It's just easy to get into useful information. But what was the catalyst for this, and how's this program gone?
Well, it's gone exceptionally well. I'll tell you, you know, when we first started talking about this about 2 years ago, just as you said, you know, people didn't believe we had trafficking happening in our state. When in fact, unfortunately, we have it all across our state. But now we're all rising to the occasion, and we're going in, we're doing these rescues. We're telling these traffickers not to come in. But this is just such a great tool, primarily designed for law enforcement. So when they are in the process and they stop someone or they see someone, they can also help educate their communities about what does it look like? How do we go in and respond? Because they're victims, and it's very hard. You know, you have to get that trust factor to get them to come with you. And so it's just very trying, but it's very compassionate. So this book is just as a great response. It gives all the tools. It sets out all the laws. Again, what are the signs you look for? So we thought this would be extremely helpful for our law enforcement, so they would have this all, you know, categorized together. And the terminology, you know, it's very different, but it helps our law enforcement to understand, you know, what are the branding, you know, who are the what are the in-call, the out-call, what are they doing? And many times it's primarily young women. We have rescued some young men as well, but primarily we'll see that it's young women. But this helps when you do stop someone. You look for the coercion, the fraud. If you see someone is controlling an individual, it's been very successful for our law enforcement to have this. We've also been working with our training our law enforcement. So to date, we've already trained over 250 of law enforcement members, and they're doing a fantastic job. That's what has been so successful, is having them come forward, and this is just a tool for them.
Yeah, I mean, there's some telltale signs that maybe not be recognizable without this sort of training, where your agency has done the research, done the homework on this, and this is really driven by experience and actual events. And so educating them, giving them a bit of a heads up, it may be all around them, and they don't even know. Even the chief even said that, you know, when he's been on the program a couple of times. So I can see where this would be quite useful. I worry also, General, about our law enforcement officers coming upon these situations, how that affects them mentally. It's got to when they see some of this, especially if it's familiar exploitation. How do they deal with that? And are we giving them the resources and the tools they need to just for therapy when they encounter these situations?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's very hard on these law enforcement officers when they do find an individual. I mean, you're going in, you're doing a takedown. You know, this is a young person's life, and how do we get them to come forward, to trust us, to get them to the resources, to some new shelter? Because, again, now they're going out of their comfort zone. And you got to remember, so many of them have been brainwashed. They've been doing this now for such a long time. They don't know any other way of life. And, you know, Dean's got, he does a great job, the whole law enforcement community. But you do see it, and it's very hard on these law enforcement officers to go in and see these situations, see where these individuals are compromised, and to see, like I said, the horrific things that these individuals have to go through and who they have to answer to. And then you have these, pimps and just different that are governing their 24/7. And, as we've been doing this together for the last couple of years, Gerard, like I said, it's been very successful. We've had, 140 plus rescues of these victims. We've done over 33 operations with our law enforcement partners, and that speaks volumes. And then, to be able to get them to some services and to some next steps is what it's all about, how we can help these individuals and survivors.
We'll come back, continue this discussion, and also get an update on the Dobbs case and what you think we may need to work on in the legislature this coming session related to that. We got Attorney General Lynn Fitch in the Element Wealth Studios. We're coming right here on Middays. Attorney General Lynn Fitch in the Element Wealth Studios. So, your office has been conducting training, and I see that for law enforcement primarily, right? On human trafficking. And then I see that recently you were in DeSoto County doing this. But just reading through here, something we got from your office, General, training Mississippi bus drivers, school bus drivers, to be able to recognize these situations. Department of Public Safety, beer distributors, trucking companies, truck drivers, so that they see it, because they're obviously traversing the landscape of the state, and they're likely to encounter this and may not know right there in their midst. But if they just had some understanding of what to look for, the so-called red flags, maybe they can report it, and you guys have given them a vehicle to do that, gas stations, truck stops, et cetera, billboards, truck wraps. So you're getting the word out, and we're trying to get folks educated so that they can be part of the solution and call attention to these horrific situations. Is that a successful plan that you guys are doing here?
Absolutely. It just, again, I am so thankful for all the partners who have been involved. It has been extremely successful. I think that we are getting that message out, Gerard. People understand. We are getting the information, and again, commercial drivers seeing individuals and calling us. The school bus drivers are huge, because think about it. Sometimes they're the last person that sees this child, this young person going in and to and from school, and school many times is their only safe haven. But the drivers now pick up, and they're required to take the training before they can drive one of the school buses.
Yeah.
And just the more, knowledge is powerful.
Sure.
And as we can get that information out and people can do that, people out working on the lines in utility companies, seeing, hearing, giving us information. We're about to launch off our second part of the initiative on Be the Solution. We're working with the airports, again, PSAs, again, continuing to talk about it in as many arenas and circles that we can. And then, again, even going so far as, again, I'm so excited that the legislature this year passed a bill that these traffic victims can now sue their traffickers civilly. They can go after them, because think about it. Many times these traffickers have a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a ring for them. Yeah. There's money, there's drugs, all that's happening. And so now at least they can have an option to go after their traffickers.
Interesting. Yeah, a lot of dark money involved in that, a lot of assets. It's an industry, so to speak. And, they should be taken down because they're committing horrific acts and they're breaking the law to boot.
But you're right. It's a global industry, Gerard. It's $150 billion a year industry, illegal industry across our globe. And, you think about all the traffic victims, there are upwards of 40 million across the globe that are being trafficked as we speak right now.
It's hard to comprehend it. It really is. Well, certainly appreciate the efforts of your office and the legislature for making this a priority and putting it in. That's what we want to do, is put an end to trafficking across the world, but start by doing that right here in the state of Mississippi. So that's great. Let's pivot a minute and talk about the wake of the Dobbs case. Huge day, huge victory for your office and your efforts there, the state of Mississippi, essentially overturning Roe v. Wade and sending the issue of abortion back to the states. Now we got states busy working in different directions, honestly. We got the deep blue states that are working to try to open up and increase access and availability to abortion. We got many of the red-controlled states that are doing just the opposite. But let's talk about Mississippi. What do we need in the wake of this? I know you've been traveling the state speaking a lot about it. What do we need from the legislature? What do we need in the way of law or policy here in the state to deal with this situation?
Well, the Mississippi Dobbs case, incredibly successful case for our state, and moving forward, it was certainly a rule of law case, and to have the United States Supreme Court rule in the favor of returning it to the people. Everyone should make that decision in each respective states. And you're right, Gerard, to your point, every state is acting differently, responding differently, different laws, as it should be. And that's why it was so important to return it to each respective state.
Sure.
And with that comes, a lot of responsibility. We said in our brief this was about empowering women and promoting life. And we also said that we are ready for the job in each state. In Mississippi, if you return it to us, we take those responsibilities very seriously, and we will continue to move forward. So with that great success now comes things that we must do in the future. How do we do that? How do we react? And here are a few things that I think are so important for all of us to consider. It's certainly a call of action. I think we need to have laws passed, rules and regulations, because next steps. So next steps are we have to have a safety net. We certainly need to be there for these pregnancy centers. We need to be providing, time and talents and dollars to support these pregnancy centers. We have over 30 in the state of Mississippi. But then next steps, we need to look at how we need to have affordable, accessible, quality child care. No question, we've got to address that. It's important as we move forward. Right now, it costs more to send an infant and a toddler to daycare for a year in the state of Mississippi than it does to send a student to one of our fine colleges and universities. That's just unacceptable. I mean, these young parents, they're trying to move forward, and they're spending that much on daycare, and it's got to be accessible, but it's got to be quality. We've got to have the best education for these young children because, again, we want them to continue to rise in their educational levels. We've got to talk about workplace flexibility, having options for these young parents. That goes hand in hand with child care. But again, it's significant because if we don't have that, we lose some of these young parents out of the workforce, and we need them all to stay in. If you peel it back, you see that young mothers many times are who we lose out of the workforce. Mm-hmm. And then we've got to enforce child support. We've got to have people, fathers primarily, that owe child support. They've got to pay. For far too long, mothers have borne that burden, and it's not right because those mothers never get to upskill. They can't move forward because they're not even receiving their child support. Now, the win-win is if the custodial parent pays their child support, then they're invested in the life of their child, which is exactly where you want them to be. The more that they're invested in their child's life, the better of a healthy environment for that child. And then, lastly, just rounding out some of the big topics are adoption and foster care. We've got to streamline that process. It is so important to put these children in families that will love them and help them thrive. And right now, we're not making the connection. And if you're not making the connection, then you have a broken system. And so we've got to change the dynamics very quickly on that as well.
I know lots of folks who have are blessed and have adopted, and not a single one of them speaks very highly of the adoption process in our state. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's arduous, it's time intensive, and it's expensive. And I think if we could break through some of those regulations and take down some of those barriers, maybe we would have more folks that would be able to adopt children in our state. But as it stands right now, it's pretty difficult and it's expensive.
It is. It's an impediment to get to these children. And we've got to streamline it. We've got to make sure all the steps are there and that it doesn't take that long to get these children. And they shouldn't be bounced around.
Right.
And it's just not healthy for them. And unfortunately, we have too many children right now that are in the custody of the state that don't even have a plan. So it's just so sad for all of us. And again, we are such a loving, compassionate state. This is truly one we've got to address here very quickly.
Yeah. So by custody of the state, what we're talking about is the Department of Human Services, essentially, correct, is responsible for these children that are essentially in foster care. Sometimes they're placed with foster parents. Sometimes they're not. And those workers are overwhelmed with these cases. There's no doubt about it. Having had 2 foster children 12, 13 years ago, saw it firsthand. It really is incredible. And I think if we could break through some of these obstacles to adoption, we could improve that situation.
Oh, absolutely. And again, the ultimate goal is to get these children into these homes and to not have them sit around and wait and then they age out. And we're doing a disservice to these children who, as you said, could be in these homes just like yours and could grow up and thrive. And so that's a goal, and it should be for all Mississippians to move forward in that for these children.
Well, I hope that we can work together to get something done from a legislative perspective in the coming session. I think it's time we make this that issue a priority, and we appreciate all the work and all the efforts by the Attorney General's office. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. Great to be with you.
Same here. We've got an interview just completed with Attorney General Lynn Fitch. We thank you so much for joining us today. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth